It's nice to see you. Nice to meet you, actually, face to face.
Really nice to meet you too. I love your voice so much. I feel like I know you already just from your voice.
Wow, what a nice thing. Actually, I've come to learn your voice because of the videos that I watched on your channel. I forwarded you a link to a web page, which was an email blast that I did to my subscribers. And I told them to become familiar with your work because I was going to be interviewing you. And I was hoping not to cover too many of the basic questions. I looked at the videos too, so I became familiar with your voice. Yeah.
And I really appreciate you doing this. It means so much to me. I mean, I remember when I put two and two together and figured out who you were, I just used to listen to Blossom Goodchild's channel.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when your part, I didn't even know that was you for the longest time. I remember when your part would come on, there was something about your voice that was kind of like so caring, so soothing. You portrayed that character so well. And I just felt better when I heard your voice. So then um, I had reached out to you and later because I finally figured out who you were. And I remember trying to, see if you could do my first book. And
Mm-hmm.
then I thought, oh, no big deal. I'm going to tackle this myself. I no,
Yeah. How did that go, by the way? Because I think you ended up recording in a studio. I think you might have
did.
been on vacation or something like that.
It was fine. And I think maybe it was their first Audible
Mm-hmm.
because they left in some things like I was so mad at the word geodesic. And I was like, oh, I hate this word geodesic. And they left it in there by accident, which,
Mm-hmm.
all right, because it's true. I don't want to
Actually,
have,
I kind of like that they did, not realizing that they had done that, because there's a moment in there where you get to be you. They're listening to you
right.
anyway. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's a lot of work. Thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah, yeah, it is a lot of work. It is, and I thought I did, I followed a method for estimating for the amount of finished published hours. And actually, I was very close now that
Oh,
I think
good.
about it. Because I think I said 10 hours and it came out to 9 hours and 48 minutes. The editing part of it was ridiculous. It was it because there were so many times that, I recorded myself, I edited myself, and I did a lot of do-overs, right? So I didn't have anybody cueing and then ending up with a track that was just the words spoken on the page, but instead it was a track that was supposed to be this long and was actually this long because of all the do-overs that I did. So yeah, that really is a total piece together sort of a narration in some spots, but
Yeah.
wow, wow, it was driving me crazy, but at the same time, it was really cool.
Really never want to actually read the book now because you're like, oh, I just don't want to look at the Sphinx at all or
And then I
any of
can't
these
stand hearing
parts.
the guy either who's talking. So,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the guy who's talking. Well,
mm,
he's pretty good.
thanks. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it.
I'm sure people have told you this before, but your voice isn't just your voice. It's like otherworldly. It comes across bringing different tones and different kind of information with it. So I feel really lucky that you narrated my book.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. That really means a lot to me. It really does.
I'm
And
sure I'm not the first person that's told you that.
I've heard it from many, but you're the first one that I want to share something with. I did, well, other people know this as well, but I did a lot of healing work. I did a lot of clearing out my own closet, and it over years, Sarah, years. And I was left raw on many occasions and empty. And then finally, one day, it just filled it back up again.
Wow.
And I know that everything that I went through and all the work that I did to heal myself through the process and come back to being who I really am, which wasn't really all that far from who I was, but without all that gunk that piled down over the years. When the light
Right.
started shining through again, well, I was able to express myself in ways that were like coming from my soul. you know?
Yes, I
And
totally understand.
mm,
It
mm,
makes so much sense as
mm,
to why you do
mm.
this job, this narration, because it is coming from your soul. But not only that, the light shines through you and it heals people.
Mm.
It makes total sense.
Wow. And wow. So I don't think it could have happened if I hadn't healed myself first, I guess you could say.
Thank you for giving this gift to people. I feel really lucky that you're going to be giving this gift through my book too. Almost like I'm giving a gift to my readers.
I just got goosebumps. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Pena, and this is Enlighten Me. Discussions with people on a mission, perhaps like you, who have a commitment to their purpose and the courage to see it through. Today, my guest is Sarah Breskman Cosme. Sarah is a best-selling author of A Hypnotist's Journey to Atlantis and the author of A Hypnotist's Journey to the Secrets of the Sphinx. Sarah is a master hypnotist, a level 3 practitioner of Dolores Cannon's QHHT, and a student of Dr. Brian Weiss. With a passion to reveal hidden or undiscovered knowledge vital to the enlightenment of humanity, Sarah continues to speak about her work worldwide. And today, that worldwide meets us here. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate you joining me. Your first book, I have to admit that I'm not familiar with it. However, I'm quite intimately familiar with your second book. Did you know you were going to make a second book?
You know, I didn't. I had no idea. I didn't know I was going to make a first book. I don't consider myself a writer whatsoever. These books aren't written by me at all. Not at all. I'm just the one that kind of edits and the background. But literally, they're so guided to the point where I was working with my mother for a little while to go over some of the information, and I wanted to take out the part on Mars, and all the words went off the page. All the words were just disappeared off the computer, I mean, and didn't come back until I put the Mars piece back in there. It's so guided. I didn't really realize this when I first started doing what I'm doing, but now I mean, I know how guided it is. The whatever you want to call it, the higher consciousness or whatever, whoever they are that have an agenda, they're the ones that basically arrange the different clients for me that come in and share the important knowledge that ultimately they want to get out to the world.
You know, I find it interesting having finally had this realization that the role that you play with your clients is something where the focus is on them for their benefit, for their healing, for their growth, for their development. So to find out that there is, as you described, is a bit of an orchestrated set of events that eventually sends these people to you, has you work with them, and somehow that interaction is something that is serving a greater purpose. When did you first have this realization?
I first realized this when I worked with Jen, my first subject for these books. I just needed a subject on the spot. I needed to find somebody, and I wanted to find a friend or somebody that I could that wouldn't mind being videotaped for this class I wanted to take. And for some reason I asked her, although in hindsight, looking back on it, it's insane that I would ask Jen because of all my friends, she was the most closed-minded friend I had at that time. She wasn't open to spirituality whatsoever. She didn't believe in past lives. She didn't believe in extraterrestrials. And the reason I knew this was because we were friends for 10 years. And I would kind of bring up things every now and then, and she just didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't something she believed in. She was very scientific, and she was a teacher at the kids' school, the same school that my children went to. So she had a very scientific background. She taught history, and she didn't believe in these things.
Hmm.
So on the spur of the moment, I just asked her if she would be my subject, if she wouldn't mind if I regressed her and videotaped her for this project I was doing for this class. And I told her that, you can really find out who you are. You can find out your true purpose, and you can even heal your body if you have any physical issues. And that's when she looked at me and told me, I have this issue that I haven't told anyone about, especially from the school, suffering from this brain condition called pseudotumor cerebri. And basically, it mimics a tumor, but it's filling up different pockets of her brain with spinal fluid. And it was causing all kinds of issues. And she was on these heavy duty medications that she was put on by this team of specialists at the University of Miami. And they told her, there's no cure for this. The best we can give you is 20 years, but you have to stay on this heavy duty medication. So she was excited to work with me. She said, I'll definitely be your subject because I'll try anything to heal myself. And I told her, you might see a past life. And I asked her, do you believe in extraterrestrials? I just wanted to go through the basics. She said, definitely. She didn't think she believed in extraterrestrials, but she was open to the possibility of past lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I began all of this, with just, we were both, not suspecting something like this would happen. And in our first session, when I regressed her, she went back to this lifetime in Lemuria, and she described it in so many details. I mean, when she was remembering this lifetime, she could still smell the flowers and the plants. She knew exactly how the birds sounded. In so many details, she understood that they used certain crystals. She understood the different ways that they communicated with their ancestors. And she also realized that she was a princess in this place, in this beautiful place in the South Pacific. And at one point, she was taken as a prisoner by these really advanced people that were considered Atlanteans at the time. So that's how we got into all of this stuff. But the way I got into the second book was after I finished my first book, A Hypnotist's Journey to Atlantis. The higher consciousness kept saying, you need to keep going. There's a lot more they wanted to share with the world because the world needs us so desperately now. And I forgot to say that after our first session, she felt something happening within her brain. All of a sudden, this pseudotumor started draining, and she felt better after the very first session. So she went back about a month later to her team of specialists, and she was healed. And they couldn't find any reason for this. But during our first session, her higher consciousness said that the pseudotumor, was to get her to see me, was to get her to uncover this stuff with me, and that the both of us were supposed to share it with the world because this information is so valuable and the world needs it now. And they were going to use the both of us to get this through, and they wanted us to do it. So of course, I was very excited, and she was too, because she didn't know any of this stuff. She didn't believe in Atlantis beforehand. And I thought our second session was going to lead us to the beginning of that lifetime in Lemuria, where I thought we were going to learn about her childhood, and I was going to find out everything there was to know about Lemuria. That was my expectation. But I don't lead my clients. I just ask the higher consciousness to take us to the next place, wherever they want to show us. And I ask them to take us to the beginning of the story they wanted us to share with the world. So she didn't go and regress back to this ancient time in Lemuria. She regressed back to a time when she was a commander on an extraterrestrial commander on a ship, crash landing on Earth for the first time. This is somebody who does not believe in extraterrestrials. My first thought was, oh my goodness, what is she going to think when she wakes up after this hypnosis session? And that is what led us into this new world. I mean, already I had clients remember being an extraterrestrial, but there was something different about Jen. And I understood why we were supposed to uncover this information together, because she could tune in, and really it was as if she was in the ship. She remembered everything about what it was like to be an extraterrestrial, a crash landing on Earth. She described these different vortices that you would go through when you were on that different planet. And it was so fascinating, the different belief systems they had. So they would create these different vortexes, and everyone had to go. This is, we found out, the Pleiades. Everyone had to go through this vortex. And when you went through this vortex, it would almost shock enlightenment into you. And what you would see when you would go through the vortex is you would really understand the secret of the universe. And the secret of the universe that countless higher selves keep saying is that life is a game, that this is just a game. But this game has been going on for longer than human beings can comprehend in the aspect of time. Because actually, we're all part of this group. No one's less than, no one's different. Everyone's a part of this universal consciousness. And what we do is we experiment, we go to different planets, and we live our life through that planet, and we see all the different experiences we can gain from that planet. And then when that planet dies, we go to another planet. We're constantly doing this as a universal collective, and we're multidimensional. So we're experiencing different lifetimes as this current lifetime. And we're doing all this to gain experience, to really find out who we really are. This is essentially a game, is what they always say. So that was one of the things that I found so fascinating, that you had to go through this vortices in order to experience this enlightenment, in order to live as a higher conscious being on this planet. And it was almost like, instead of shocking you with electricity, you're shocked with enlightenment. And you understand right away, the first time you go through this vortices, that you are everyone that you come in contact with. And once you do that, there's no self-judgment anymore, because you understand how powerful you really are and how important you really are in the grand scheme of everything, because we're all that powerful and we're all that important. Group, this ancient group, we're all ancient. So that was just one of the things I found out in our second session.
The question that I have about all of that you just said, especially with regard to the vortex, I wondered, who created that vortex? Who was facilitating that? Who were the administrators that were getting people to go through this process, if you will? What is their role? And I wondered if you had delved into any of that yet.
It was interesting, because there seemed to be a governing body on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And what was a little upsetting to some of my clients that also came from this one, well, I guess there's multiple planets, especially in the Pleiades, who crash landed on Earth as part of the experiment. They weren't told that they would be crash landing on Earth. It was something that was orchestrated without their knowledge. Now, they're more of a, so there is a hierarchy on these planets, it seems like, according to my clients. But
Right.
There's a different understanding, they seem to be, well, I shouldn't say we on other dimensions seem to be knowledgeable and closer to source, closer to understanding that we are God in these other places. So I haven't come across anybody mad about this happening or upset about it happening, just upset in the way that it happened. Because Jen, as she was remembering being the commander of this ship, she felt responsible for her team that was coming down to help, seed the population at the time. And some died in this. Now, during this lifetime, I believed it was her fault. The ship function. There was a problem with the breathing mechanisms. They could breathe on Earth. They could breathe oxygen, which is one of the reasons why they came to seed Earth. But she felt responsible throughout that whole life until she passed from that lifetime. And that was a lot of trauma that she had to release in this lifetime as well, being in charge of people and letting them die. And, she thought the whole experiment was a failure at the time, until retrospect, understanding that it was anything but a failure, that it was exactly what they were supposed to do.
And she was able to reach closure with that.
Yes, so beautiful.
Yeah, and I remember reading that, and as I did, I felt like when she was first describing how they didn't know that they were going to be crash landing and not have a way back, there was a betrayal there that
Yeah.
I felt. And although she didn't delve too deeply into that, I carried that feeling of betrayal for her while I was reading the balance of it until she finally did come back around and have a different perspective and look at it, from that perspective after that lifetime.
Right.
But also recognizing that it was something she took with her through the end of her lifetime. So she never reached that closure during
Right.
that period. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Wow. I really felt for her as whatever kind of being she might have been at the time.
Right.
Because they were humanoid, but not human.
It was so interesting because when she was preparing, when she was, fully focused and remembering being an extraterrestrial, when they were preparing to come to Earth, it was so she just didn't understand why anybody would need to walk on a planet or why they would need to eat and gravity. They had to take classes to
Mm-hmm.
really understand what it was going to be like to come to Earth because it was so foreign to them. It's so fascinating. And they took all kinds of classes. They prepared many different, things. And they had, she said, they were lucky they had practiced the extraction technique for crashes because they understood they would grab each other's hands and then ultimately leave their ship quickly if they had to. But she didn't know that they were going to experience a crash. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
their technology is so advanced, it seemed very unlikely. I've had other clients, remember crashes on different planets and things like that, but usually it has something to do with the atmosphere. Like if
Mm-hmm.
there's a volcano on a different planet that's erupting, for some reason their ships can't really withstand that for some reason.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I agree. Um, Still, just the idea that they weren't aware that they were going to have this kind of experience, especially going there for the purpose of expanding their awareness and understanding so they could populate the earth with more of their kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to integrate them back into their society. So, how did they plan on getting them back? Well, I imagine they could have always sent more ships,
They
but
sent a lot of ships. So I've had a lot of clients that remember this time or one of the times. I wonder how many times it's been going on.
mhm.
They crashed so that they had to stay here. And they had to see the population. They had no choice. They couldn't go back. They had to really immerse themselves in this, I guess, ultimately experiment.
For anybody who hasn't read the book, this really is only a portion of it. And while
Right.
Jen did have very significant closure on it, there's so much more in the book that I don't really want to give away, mind you, but it takes the fun out of reading it, I think. I would like to ask you about other clients. For example, I saw a clip of, was it the lady's name Florence?
Jasmine, maybe?
Jasmine. Hmm. Was that when I looked at that clip, I wondered, was that somehow related to the and fed into the book about the Sphinx? Because she did speak about a uniform. She spoke about a
Oh,
star on her uniform and what one of the points on the star meant. So maybe you can tell me about
um,
that.
well, the reason I wanted to share that clip is because these clients don't know one another, never met one another. And these are people who know about extraterrestrials. But if you listen to the two clips, or I have many more, they describe themselves the same way. So how do they do that? How do they describe the same way with a different on their breast pocket to find this information? So I feel like for me, I've always been kind of skeptical until I can prove something to myself.
Mhm.
That helped prove it to me was these different people saying the same things who have never met one another.
Mhm. Gotcha. Corroboration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Wasn't there either an older gentleman or an older female who corroborated some of that as well? Someone you spoke to in the book. I think it might have been an older gentleman.
There it's always the way with these books that even if think I'm starting the book and I think, oh, I'm probably not going to use that session. I don't know what they want me to write about yet. I'll save it because later on it's going to make sense. The way they send me my clients and send me the different sessions, it all fits in a story. I really am serious. Sometimes I feel bad and guilty about putting my name on the book because I'm not the one that's writing it whatsoever. But yes, this happens all the time where people will say basically the same thing. And a lot of times I'll have a client just come in for a session and they'll describe something to me. And then the client the day after will describe the same things. It's really fascinating. Like, for instance, I had a bunch of women that were postmenopausal that would come in and claim they were pregnant. And I think I had four, maybe five, maybe one after the book that would say that they've been to their doctor's offices and they would do scans and there was nothing showing up. So they were put on like Ativan. One was put on Ativan and said, just try to relax. This is because of your hormones, it's postmenopausal issues. But they knew what pregnancy felt like because they had had children. So they finally ended up seeing me, and their higher consciousness said that they were pregnant, that they weren't making this up, that they knew what a pregnancy felt like. But nothing was going to show up on a scan because they were part of this group that's seeding a whole different new planet because Earth always needs a backup planet. And so there's a lot of people involved in this group seeding this other Earth, but they have to use postmenopausal women because it's easier to hide. So if any of your listeners are going through this and they think they're crazy, listen, you're not. You're not crazy. I've seen it a couple times.
Yeah, that's becoming more and more, how can I put it? More and more people are becoming aware of that
Right.
because it relates to a program evidently some civilizations are running for the purpose of regenerating their civilization. At least that's my understanding of it,
Right.
via the human, where the human doesn't have any. This is the part where I'm still kind of have an issue with it, where the human being doesn't have any conscious choice in the matter.
So I think you're talking about the gray extraterrestrials. A lot of my clients that have been contacted by gray extraterrestrials, when they're very deep under hypnosis and I'm speaking with their higher consciousness, I found out this really interesting thing about this. A lot of times it's themselves contacting themselves. So if you think about time, it doesn't exist in the rest of the universe. If you just picture that in your mind, that means everything that has ever happened has already happened, is happening now, and everything in the future is happening now. So if you think about how we're evolving, there are future versions of yourself that have a lot of technology and know where you are and time travel really easily. So wouldn't you check on yourself, make sure you're doing well and you're following your purpose and you're basically, you would probably try to help you. Even if you think about yourself as an adult, you imagine if you could tap into yourself as a child, you want to help that child. So a lot of times I've noticed that these beings that are extraterrestrial are actually us, taking us. And they're doing that because they're us. So they want to help themselves, or it's family members, or sometimes they're upgrading themselves. But the gray extraterrestrials are really interesting because there are many different paths that a human can go down, and there's multiple paths. You can't do this wrong, but there's multiple paths. So there are gray extraterrestrials that some would say part of them would be future versions of humanity if they go down this timeline where they really evolve their technology and they forget about their emotions and their soul. So basically what happened to this one future timeline of a faction of humanity, they lose their planet. That's why they look the way they do. Their eyes are the shape that a human would be if living in space for millennia. And then it's taller. They have different, types of bodies, these different versions of ourselves in the future. But there's another version of humanity, and people would consider that the Arcturians. And they are humanity in the future that has ascended both with their spirituality and their technology. They've created this merger, and they are so far advanced in both of these that they are light beings. They don't even need to experiment anymore. They're just us helping us. At least that is what I continuously get in my sessions. Nobody is separate than anybody else. Everybody's the same, ultimately. That's the secret that we're all basically each other.
Yeah, that's quite something to wrap your arms around. Even if you are someone who's been awakened to this kind of esoteric and exo political information, yet, for example, it touches on the idea of oneness. And oftentimes when oneness has been presented, it's been presented within the context of the human being, the human
Right.
experience. And what you just touched on was oneness, if you will, that also relates to not only the human, but other types of humanoid beings and even light beings, etc., whatever that might be out in existence. Do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, well, there's different laws and different rules for different spheres. So this sphere has a rule of duality. So it's not like there's good and bad even. Everything is the same. So you come here knowing these rules. And if you're going to play this earth game and you're going to be in this earth school, then you have to abide by the rules. So it's duality. There's good and bad, but they're ultimately still one. So yes, there are different factions that would be considered part of the negative polarity, but they're playing a role as well. You can't really experience true bliss here without experiencing the opposite. That's just how everything plays upon itself in this reality. That's just part of the rule of this dualistic realm.
Yeah, you touched on the contrast between suffering, if you will, and bliss on the far end of the spectrum. Not really appreciating the bliss if you didn't have perhaps some version of lower vibrational experience in life. Otherwise, it would just be the same blissful feeling every day, wouldn't it?
And that's what a lot of the ETs from different planets that are all light say. They say it's beautiful. I mean, it's absolute. If you were to see that planet, you would be absolutely so amazed at the beauty, and it's so stunning. And everybody just communicates through their minds and manifests whatever they want to. And they have so many different projects and instruments and music, and it's blissful. It's complete bliss. I mean, you can live on these planets, but what they also say is that it gets boring. And they like to inhabit an earth body. They like to come here and experience this 3D mess, as they said. They always say humans are so messy, and that's their job. They have to be messy. They shouldn't be perfect because they came here to be a total mess and to just, experience everything, to have all the experiences. Because when you leave your earthly body and you reunite with all that is, you realize that you are here for these experiences, for all of these experiences. And I always wondered, why would anybody want to suffer? Why would anybody want these negative experiences? But they're sought after, believe it or not. You want these because when you leave your body and you go back to everything that there is, you really value these bad times as well, because they're what really catapulted you to something greater. And that's ultimately how it works. It's like a give and take in this reality.
I'm so glad you said that because many of us have so many times related it to this experience right here that we're having on this planet. By that, I mean having some very deep, negative, challenging, even traumatic experiences, and then finding our way through, somehow weaving our life in such a way where we can shed some of the trauma, release any guilt, judgment, fear, hurt, pain, etc., and then turn our life around and bring more light into it, if you will. all within the space of this particular lifetime. What you just described is someone having this messy 3D Earth experience and taking it into afterlife, if you will, or between lives. Now, that's something I can't speak to. I love the way you do, because it feels like you have zero issues with embracing that concept. And frankly, there are times that I don't have any issue embracing it, but I think you can tell I'm still not willing to just fully embrace anything that I haven't had any experiential reference with. And
Well, that's very healthy.
and that touches on a level of knowing. And this is something I personally operate from, and many people do. So tell me, how is it that you came to embrace this broader perspective? And you do so, and this is definitely not intended to be a dig in any way. In a sense, it's almost like evangelical. And yet, by the same token, I do appreciate that you do so, because it also has an element of promise that goes along with it.
Well, this is what I hear from the higher consciousness all the time. So I do this job almost every single day. And this is what I hear from people, even the most skeptical people. As soon as they, are deep within hypnosis and I'm speaking with, part of what I do is I'll regress the client first and I bring them to the deepest level of trance. And then after going through the regression, I access their all-knowing subconscious or their higher consciousness. And that's where I ask all these questions. And when you tap into the subconscious, you're basically tapping into universal consciousness, because everybody is connected to everybody else. So you can find out anything in this state. And this is what comes through. This is what the higher consciousness says over and over and over again. And I've always been a skeptical person. I mean, I've suffered a lot, especially in my childhood, and I dealt with a lot of things, and I still do, and I get mad. But whenever I ask these questions, it's always the same. You came for this experience. You're here to learn. This will catapult you to something greater. I mean, suffering has always been the doorway to enlightenment, I guess, for thousands and thousands of years. But, it's amazing what we can do with our negative feelings that I think people don't really realize. Everything that we have, that we come equipped with, serves a purpose. Like our illnesses, our issues within our body are communication tools. They're our body communicating with us. And once the message is known, it can instantly be released and healed. Same with feelings, same with emotions. Our emotions are so powerful. And I've had clients say under hypnosis, or their higher consciousness say, humans don't really realize the energetics of a human, because the blueprint of a human is such that emotions are the gateways through the universe. People can use their emotions for so many different ways. But one thing people can do is, if you really follow the integrity of a negative emotion, it will bring you to bliss, but you can't judge it. You have to follow it all the way down to its core. You really have to allow this emotion to just come through you and follow it as deep as you can. And it brings you to the opposite. So it'll bring you to bliss. I know that might be a little confusing, but that's ultimately what everything is set up in our bodies and our universe. And it's ultimately to be communicating with us constantly. And we can communicate with our bodies, with our emotions. There's so much to learn if we go inwards.
That's something I can relate to and embrace 100%. Thanks for saying that.
Sure.
I want to shift back to the book for a moment because there was a question that came up, and I have it right here. There's a bit of how can I put it? So I think of you being the facilitator, and I was reading what I was playing out in the book in two parts. One was a Christmas party, and the other was in the hospital stay. The Christmas party was very uncomfortable, and just you felt really badly for Christy.
Yeah.
And in the hospital, it just was downright, in some places, just downright disgusting. So there was a lot of emotion that came up during both of those events in different ways. So there's a lot of feeling that comes along with it. And I see you, and you have this sweet demeanor, almost as if you would want to protect yourself from hearing things like that. And yet there you are, you just jump right in there and go right for it. So how do you reconcile that for yourself?
I think, like everyone, I'm just made for the job I'm in. It doesn't really bother me. I don't know. Maybe it's like a doctor that has to perform surgery on a child. I don't really think about it. It doesn't affect me in any way. But
Okay.
I've been asked that before.
All right. And so what is it like your process that you do that where you ask for them to tell you more about it, etc.? Or are you just following or are you following your intuition through this?
I'm following my intuition, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel like I get the questions coming into my ear
Mm-hmm.
almost, and I'll hear them. And so I'll just know what to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I basically rely on that.
Well, I imagine by now, how many years have you been practicing now?
Since 2009,
Okay, so that's a good long number of years. There's a lot of experience that goes into your sessions.
that's
So,
why I'm so passionate about sharing it because
mhm.
I hear this stuff all the time. And how would anybody else have access to this information? But it's so valuable. The information is so valuable and it's helped me tremendously. So I think, gosh, I bet it could help a lot of other people because how would anybody know? Other people don't do this job like I do every day.
And people like yourself, perfectly cut out for that kind of role. And I'm so glad to see, by the way, that Julia Cannon continues her mother's work and is bringing more people into the world to be a facilitator for others. Because when you think about the practitioners that are doing this kind of work, so few, and there are so many people on this planet, all affected in very much the same way by their earthly experience here.
Mhm.
So, how cool is that?
It is really cool. It's really exciting to see what's happening on the planet. People are really starting to question things and they're really starting to understand the value of getting the answers from themselves. And they're trying all different kinds of things to find out these answers. And the answers are right there. It's amazing, really. I'm excited.
Another question about the book. So, at the end, you did some research on Christie, and I was wondering if you had any follow-up information, anything else come to light since then?
Still can't find her. I believe there are no records of her. I don't think they even kept records of her. Because she didn't even see anything on her anywhere. And we searched for it. The only thing we could find was some mail at her mom's house. And so we basically figured out, where she lived and the different places that she frequented and things like that. But as far as an actual record of her, I can't find anything. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping one day a picture shows up or something like that. That would be fantastic. When we were looking for a picture, Jen said there were a few in boxes, but people wouldn't really know who that picture belonged to. So maybe if someone reads the book and they know somebody in that area and they can put two and two together, that would be amazing.
Sure would. There was another topic that came up in there. I think it came up a number of times, the cedar races.
Mhm.
And are you having a lot of clients have discussions with you about the cedar races?
Yeah, a lot of times. I mean, there's a lot of people, I guess, you could call them people that have been here since the beginning, that they just incarnate. They want to see what's going to happen, with this ascension and with humanity.
Mhm.
It's really exciting to them. And they're going to stay through the whole thing and see what happens.
Okay. On both sides of the light, if you will, because my understanding is that a person could be sitting here having had life experience on Earth for millennia in various incarnations, but not for the purpose of anyone's benefit but their own. How do you feel about that?
Definitely.
Hmm.
There are definitely people, beings, energy that hold this negative polarity.
Mhm.
You know, when I was working with a lot of my subjects, Earth wasn't supposed to be like this. This wasn't supposed to be a planet with this negative energy that asserted itself on the planet. It was an accident. There was this, what people call this fear virus that came on the back of either a ship or an asteroid, but somehow it lodged itself on Earth. And once it's there, you can't get rid of it. And the whole experiment just seemed to be, you know, such a shame because it wasn't what it was supposed to be for this earth. That's one of the reasons why a lot of these women that are seeding this other planet are very special women. And there's a lot of precautions to make sure this fear virus doesn't get on one of these other planets. The planet that a lot of people are going to. I mean, there's so many different planets. There's so many different Earth planets as well. But the one that I keep getting these women seeding, there's a lot of precautions to not let the spear virus on that planet. But apparently, this virus asserted itself on the planet. And that's one thing that a lot of us collectively are trying to release different layers of this spear virus. And we do that by releasing our fear. Not that fear is such a bad thing, but to just really understand it, to sit with it, to question it, and then process it and release it is such a huge thing to do right now. You know, when you were saying, when you leave your body and you go back to the in between and you know all these things and you take things with you, a lot of higher consciousness will say that if you can work on yourself in your current life and really release the trauma in your current life, that there is nothing better than that. There's no greater reward than working through your issues in your life. That when you do that, the relief you feel is, they just said it's like bliss. It's something that people really want to experience, but it's very challenging to do. But if you can do this, it's a huge accomplishment.
It's a reward in itself.
Yeah.
And we get the benefit of living a life with that rewarded experience as part, that we integrate into our furthering life experiences here on Earth. Unlike the experience that Jen had when she was a commander on a ship and it crashed, and she dealt with the betrayal, what I consider to be
Right.
betrayal, etc., and
Right.
to live that entire life through without getting any reconciliation from that.
Right.
So to do it now in this lifetime, rather than waiting until you do reincarnate into something somewhere else, yeah, I definitely feel the value in that. Thanks for saying
Right.
that. Hmm.
Sure. Everything in this world is trying to help us let go. We're always being triggered, always getting angry,
Hmm.
always having issues. And the purpose of that is to help us release our trauma, believe it or not, to let things go by processing it.
I would like to begin to close here with this kind of a message because, it's something that I feel is vital for us. And it's work that we ultimately end up doing for ourselves. We can go to individuals like you who are facilitators to help us see things from a different perspective for ourselves, have those experiences from previous lifetimes, from this lifetime, related to trauma, challenge, etc. Perhaps getting some answers. And yet, by the same token, you touched on something that is just as vital. You could call it aftercare, and that aftercare would be for ourselves, by ourselves, to ourselves, and that would be to further tap into the things that make us tick and feel the way we feel. Judgment is a huge one that I dealt with for quite some time, and every now and then it'll pop up, and I catch myself, and that's the beauty. I can catch myself now, where before it was part of who I was and how I operated. I never saw it. I was just being me. You're the one that screwed up. You don't like that, right? Yeah. So
Well,
anyway.
well, really quickly, it's really interesting because the higher consciousness will say that if you really want to help, if you really want to do your part and help, that one of the greatest things you can do is self mastery. But there's a reason for that because most people, when they leave their bodies and they go to the in between, they just bring their memories. They don't really leave anything. But what happens when you really master yourself and you really develop this inner dialogue with the higher consciousness and you really master self love, you leave an imprint, almost like Buddha, like Christ consciousness. You leave an imprint that other people can tap into. You leave something that's so valuable on this earth. So, the way to do that is self mastery.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you. So, Sarah, before we close, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience? I know that we discussed your book. I'll be showing it right here with me right now. But in addition to that, aside from this beautiful message that you just finished on and underscored regarding self-mastery, what else would you like to share with us before you go?
Well, there's lots of people that don't really want to be here, and you're not alone. I mean, so many people have volunteered to come in, and they're not used to having a human life, and they're so sensitive. But the higher consciousness is always saying, try to find your tribe, try to find like minded individuals, that you're not alone, and you have such an important role. Just don't give up.
Beautiful. Sarah, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much, A, for thinking of me, B, for bringing the kind of things, for bringing the kind of healing and help that you are for people and helping them to jettison off into a direction that's going to be beneficial for them. I love seeing this kind of work done and love hearing how you so freely express the kinds of things that are vital for us to embrace. And it seems like you fully embraced them and integrated them into who you are today. So thank you for being that example, I think, that people would benefit from seeing more of.
And thank you so much for carrying the force basically when you speak. I really appreciate what you're doing.
My pleasure. All right. Sarah, where can people find you?
You can go to my website at theholistichuhypnotist.com, and I'm going to be speaking at the UFO conference in Laughlin, Nevada, November 11th through the 13th, and I'm so super excited because I'm going to share some more clips, and I'm going to really try to share exactly what's been coming through sessions as far as extraterrestrials are concerned. It's really mind-blowing. And then I'm also going to be speaking at the Conscious Life Expo, February 10th through the 13th, and that's going to be very exciting as well. And I hope to connect with you guys and share my knowledge. If it can help somebody, that will really make my day. So
beautiful. Sarah Breskman Cosme, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.